Scott.
Hi, Hannah.
Hey, how are you doing?
Yeah, well,
Good.
you?
Yeah, very good. Thank you very much. So you're my second guest on 15 Minutes With, where we find out much more about our partners in the office management portal. And you are Scott Barnes from FreshGround.
Thanks, Hannah. Yeah, thanks for the introduction. So we've known each other for a long time now. It was going back to City Index. I think I can't even remember the year, but it's got to be well over 5 years since I met you there. And I remember at the time, I remember well, you were stuck in, I think that the challenge that we came to solve or to help you with was a horrendous contract, I'm going to call it.
Yeah.
Stuck in with some vending machines and coffee machines, but we won't mention the competitor. Other than that, we were just there to try and help out and sort out that little fix at the time. But lots of interesting journeys since. So working with yourself and other office managers like you, and the portal's been a great tool to connect us.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So you guys, yeah, you're right. We met and actually City Index up. So my consultancy is 5 years old now. So we're talking almost 10 years ago we would have met. And I loved what you guys did because you came in and you tried to help us out of, a horrendous contract that had been signed. I literally think a day before I started the company, or the week before I started the company, do you remember? And they'd upgraded the machines whilst paying down the previous machines, which they'd only had for like a year or something. So they were paying down the debt of the previous machines. They had just signed into a lease on these new machines. People were complaining left, right, and centre on my very first day. And some months later, you came in to try and get us out of it. We couldn't, unfortunately, could we? We were tied in.
And that brings back to memory. I mean, I can't believe it's 10 years. That's just unreal. But if I think of where we were on the FreshGround journey, Hannah, going back, okay, so I'm going back right back to the 80s when we started. Our first agreement was a 7-day agreement. Okay.
Wow.
So that was like the foundation of who we are.
Yeah.
I mean, it basically wasn't an agreement. It was a piece of paper that said, we're both going to be friends, and if you pay us and take our coffee, we'll look after you, and if you like it, you have another one, kind of thing. Yeah. So that was who we were. Really interesting you say between 5 and 10 years ago, because that was about the same time that we found a lot of offices were going down this route of let's sign up 3 years. In fact, a lot of the whole service industry was saying let's sign you up for 5 years. And I'm going to call it the kind of swear word in the industry was photocopiers. People have always got a horror story, and I'm sure you could give us more than 15 minutes on that. And we signed into this contract and we can't change the kit, and if we do, then we're signed up for another set, and so we had a bit of a light bulb moment, Hannah, and it would have been around that time. Now I can't remember the exact timing of it, and we moved from saying forget 3-month contracts, let's go back to 3 year, let's go back to 3 month. And there it was. That was the beginning of the thing. And from there, we've just this last year, we've launched another 1 month. And it's almost like back to our roots. That if people are happy, they'll stay with you. And if they're not, they shouldn't be your customer anyway, because you're doing something wrong for them.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think you've hit the nail on the head, because a lot of people look to tie in for the wrong reasons. And the office managers certainly don't always know that that's, and this particular contract, I can remember it. It was something like, and maybe you can as well, because I'm sure we probably sent you a copy or an excerpt to look at it for us, where it was pretty much you had to terminate on the 29th day of the month, 3 months prior to this date and this date and whatever it may have been. And yeah, it was just so difficult to get out of it. So I remember you came in and did this trial for us. You bought one of your machines, you bought lots of treats and things. Do you remember that? And it went down really well.
I do.
You still do that?
Yeah, absolutely. We still, and that whole, that whole experience is kind of what we're all about. So people say they love that piece, and that company, City Index, you're right. They never became a client, and things have changed since then. But we have done work with them, but they're not actually the client at this point. But a lot of people, and I'm saying a lot of the people you've recommended, Hannah, put us in touch with, I should say, not recommended, where, and it's partnership, isn't it? And we've been introduced. I remember one going back 2 years now, where you made the recommendation, said, hey guys, you should talk to FreshGround. They were really cautious because we didn't have the right machines. But what actually came out at the time was that the machine's not super important. I talk about the trilogy. You've got the machine, you've got the product, but you've got the whole wrapper of support around it. And that was the really interesting bit. Now, that client that you recommended to us is still with us and firmly enjoying our coffee to this day. We didn't have the specific machine that they wanted, but actually underneath we had the service that they wanted. And isn't that the important bit? And that's the really exciting bit.
And that's the bit that as an office manager is really, like you say, where the value comes in, because, well, there's a few stems to this, in my opinion, and please share yours, but it's the coffee has to be good. Because it's what fuels your staff, and that's what they're expecting. You know, there's so many baristas and things around, particularly in London, these offices now, that you want to be able to provide coffee, ideally that keeps them within the office and that keeps them motivated and working, and it's a perk. Companies don't have to supply it, but for the office manager, that the service is next to nothing impeccable, you know, and it takes pressure and time away from you having to do the chase ups and the follow ups, and that it's proactive where it can be. So for me, certainly in my experience and speaking to office managers, that's the joy, that's the value there.
And that's what I've loved about, you know, working with you and others like you, is actually this is real life. You know, for you as an office manager, okay, so we talk about coffee because we get passionate about coffee, and that's what we provide. We just happen to do coffee. Actually, we just look after people. And I mean, you mentioned the office, Hannah. I mean, it's woven to the name of everything you do. And hasn't this year been a really, really interesting year? You know, I mean, this is, okay, so you could say you're speaking off script here. Yeah, but look at this year. And it's challenged the whole thing. There's reports now coming back saying even the tech companies in Silicon Valley want to bring back the office. So what is the office?
Yeah.
And why do we do this? Why do we have this flexibility? What, haven't we all got that third space now? When we want to do work, we want to bring some value, and we go to that office place to work. So we just happen to do coffee, and you mentioned it has to be really good, but everything in the office. So if I completely jump aside to a different industry and look at something like tech or broadband, it's got to be consistent. And nobody's asking for, you know, you mentioned really good coffee. Nobody's asking for 10 out of 10 points on everything.
No.
But when I have conversations, particularly people that are moving, the really, really interesting thing is somebody might say, well, my designers have said go for this because it's aesthetically brilliant. And I talk about measuring on a point scale rather than going for 10 out of 10. And everyone says, oh, we want the best in the world and this stuff. No, you want really good, and you want to know you can rely on it. And that might be, so where do you go for your lunch? I go to Prep because it's really fast and I can get in and out in 10 minutes. Might not be the best food in London or crafted by an artisan producer. No, but I know it's going to be consistent. So that word is everything for an office manager.
Yeah. And you
just
can't
take the
please
trouble
everybody.
out. Sorry.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you can't please everybody. So yeah, I think you're right. And one of the things you suggested when you came in was to do this survey that we did on the machines, and it wasn't just about the taste, it was the speed, it was the ease of using the machine, it was, you know, even some of the interactions that they'd had with you. So yeah, you're right. And tell me, so we've mentioned about this past year and the pandemic, and I'm really keen to hear more about Fresh Office and what you've done there, because you pivoted quite a bit to make sure that you were still able to serve your customers and your clients during this time.
Yeah, it's a great question, Hannah. And if I look back on why we created Fresh Office, and just to give you a small insight, Fresh Office probably will become Fresh something else. I'm just hoping it'll become croissants next, but we haven't quite got there yet. So watch this space. But Fresh Office to us was about saying, okay, maybe we should call it Fresh Workspace, but Fresh Office worked better. It's about saying, we know we've got to get into somewhere to work. And for the last year, our homes have served really well. Now you can see from the video, I'm in the office at the moment, but it was actually about saying what was the key need for our audience. And so for an office manager, it was a safe workspace. And that safe workspace has been Zoom, like we're on now. That's been a brilliant workspace. But you know what? There are times when we want to be back face to face. And if we're uncomfortable, the buying needs have changed now from being just something to drink, something to make me happy, but actually I want a safe workspace. So that was just to help our clients through that time. What's endured is there's been a really major change with the whole sanitisation, even PPE, everything about the workspace, it's changed. And I use two words here. It's gone from enforcement. So you've got to do this, you've got to wash your hands, you've got to put on hand sanitizer, to education. So the two E words move from enforcement to education. And that changes the whole psyche on this, because people, rather than saying you've got to do this, you've got to wash your hands, you've got to come into the office, or you've got to stay at home, actually we want to help you too. How can we do it better for you? What would make it safer? What would you like to do? And that's much softer. It's a much more enjoyable working environment. So that's kind of the message we found.
Yeah, and that's really, I mean, I've not heard of that before, and you're right. It's actually very powerful, because it's a completely different psyche. Like you say, you're not, and as an office manager, I imagine it takes the pressure off somewhat, because it's a much softer way of looking at it, and actually being able to implement the changes you're making based on educating people rather than trying to get people to do it. And we know, we were talking about it on a session recently, you can't get everybody to sanitize their hands, to wipe down the equipment before and after use and things. And then you might get people coming to you and saying, so and so didn't wipe their hands, or wash their hands, or wipe the equipment after use, and whatever else. And it becomes quite difficult. Whereas actually, if it's changed to educating, the whole messaging and the emails you send out will probably be very different, and possibly more impactful as well. And you help your clients with that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And do you know what? The really interesting thing here, Hannah, is I learned that when I was talking to a dialysis centre. So, and this is what I'd say, and this is a key message that I would give to all office managers. Don't just look at what offices do. Don't just look at what other office managers do. I was educated on this a little while ago. Go and learn from other industries who do things well. So dialysis centre, they were really struggling with highly, highly vulnerable patients. And in the first wave, they were getting an over 90% take up on people coming in and sanitising their hands. On the second wave, it dropped to well below 60%. And they told me we need to change our messaging here from enforcing it to educating people. And I just thought, that's brilliant. Yeah. That's what offices need to do. Stop telling people what they can and can't do. We're not kids.
Yeah.
And start to educate people and help people. So that's what our brand's all about. And it's moved now just to, how can we support you?
Yeah, love it. And you've got the hampers as well. Tell us a little bit about those.
Yeah, the hampers was kind of a Christmas innovation. And I can see that this Christmas is going to be another big bang. So that was really good fun. And again, that came from a moment when it was actually a law firm who I was talking to at the time. And they said, we've just taken on a lot of new recruits. And a lot of those people are really struggling because they've come into a new company. They've come into an environment. They haven't had that traditional welcome. They haven't been invited into the office and come and have a sit down. This is your desk. This is your staff. This is your colleagues. So just to send out a little touch and just say, here, this is us. We love you. You're part of the team. And so that really took off at the end of last year. Is it a hamper or is it just a little thank you? I don't know. Maybe we should come up with a new name for it. But that was another.
Well, I had one and I loved it. So thank you for mine. Whatever it's called, it was amazing. And there was so much in there that I think, coffee drinker or not, and Scott knows I'm not a coffee drinker, and it's not through choice necessarily, but it's just not for me. But yeah, I loved it. And my partner is a huge coffee drinker, and he was very excited. He was like a kid at Christmas then. So I highly recommend getting online and checking them out.
Next year's going to have to be wine, Hannah. Is that right?
Yeah, I'd have wine.
That's more up your street, isn't it?
Definitely, yeah. Christmas is about wine, as is most other days of the week. But and so, Scott, tell us. Obviously, you work with office managers a lot, and that's coming through in everything you're saying. You know, you're constantly coming back to the messaging about supporting them and doing what's best for them to make their jobs easier. What do you enjoy the most, if anything, about working with office managers?
Brilliant question, Hannah. And I guess the reason I've said what I've just said is just to give me a couple of moments to think, because one of the things I enjoy the most is the breadth of audience. But actually, if I look at the office manager, they're like the glue that holds everything together. So I love having those conversations with the CFO about, budget and challenging this and challenging that. I love having the facilities manager who talks about the nuts and bolts of what might go wrong and what. but the office managers are always the ones that get dropped the thing, and just somehow they're the magicians who have to make it all work. So the conversations I love to have is when you can move beyond what's right, what's wrong, into what will always be right, what will always work. And sometimes with one, it can be about how the cleaning works in their office. With another one, it can be the culture in their office. And so if I'm thinking about it in a broad sense, it's the variety of what you have to deal with. And that's everything I hear from you, Hannah. That blog I saw of yours the other week, brilliant. Just love the pictures on there. And, you know, you just feel like a magician at times, right? You've got to deal with everything.
Well, exactly. And we've referred to them as magicians in a number of blogs. I think I've got one called The Magic Move for that very reason. And the last event we did in person in February last year, 2020, just before the pandemic, well, it hit here anyway, we had a magic event because we were calling our office managers magicians. So yeah, completely agree. And to wrap up, I think we're probably on about our 15 minutes now. So to wrap up, what piece of advice would you give to office managers looking for services like the ones you offer, regardless of whether they come to FreshGround or not? What's the one piece of advice you could give them when they're on the hunt for new vending products, be it coffee machines, be it the hot water taps?
Straight advice that comes on the top of my mind: go with your instinct on what you think's right. But the other piece I'd say, and you might say, well, isn't this hurting yourself? No, talk to multiple suppliers and get ideas, because there's brilliant ideas out there. None of us have got all the ideas. And a supplier who can genuinely help you will try and give you broad advice on an industry, rather than just saying our brand does this, or this is the machines we do, or, you know, for us, even we happen to do coffee. Yeah, but if somebody wants to have a chat about what we know about office planting, or indeed just about looking after staff in general in the office, we've had years of experience in it. So push your suppliers to give you advice on the whole industry and how they can support you, not what we can tell you about our products, because that's boring. We want to support you in what you need to do. And I'm talking about you as the office manager, Hannah. And I think you've been one for many, many years. So you know exactly what I mean.
Yeah, no, and I completely agree on that advice. You know, you are the experts, and the office managers are scratching the surface with all these different types of trades and services and systems and installations and fabrics and things that they have to deal with in their day-to-day roles. So you, as the expert in particular areas such as the vending and the coffee, but also in you know, the gifting now that you've ventured into, in the fresh office, you know, sanitization and things that you're offering to clients as well, you are experts. So I completely agree for them to tap into your knowledge as well as other people's, and gather the best and see how, because it's that relationship building when you're doing that. And I think that builds a bridge and that builds trust, and then you see how that would work going forward. So it's a really good test.
100%. And I would add to that, Hannah, and okay, I'll put my little humble touch on the end. We're only experts for one reason, and that's because you guys have told us the knowledge in the first place. That's all we get. We've learned by being in the industry and by listening, if we have learned at all. So share that knowledge, or, you know, ask for it. And if you don't get it, then question that supplier. Are they a good supplier if they're not going to be a partnership? Because although you say we're experts, you're experts. All office managers are experts, and they've got a broader field of knowledge than we have. So it's just about collaboration now, more than ever.
Yeah, fully agree. Well, that's very kind to the office management community. That's very kind. So thank you so much, Scott. It's been wonderful to spend 50 minutes chatting with you and hear much more about FreshGround and Fresh Office, and yeah, how you support office managers. I know you love what you do. I know you're passionate about it, and I think that's really evident from today and everything we do with you. So it's been great to catch up.
Thank you for your time as well, Hannah, and good to speak. And we'll look forward to speaking to you again in person, on screen, in fact, however you like.
Yeah. Thanks, Scott. Take care.
Take care. Speak soon.